The latest on the high-stakes Supreme Court fight. Early voting hits snags in several states, and new iPhones are here. If you can afford them, here's what you need to know. Good morning, this is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Wednesday, October 14th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, good morning.
Hey, Jilly, happy hump day to you and to everyone listening. We're halfway through the week.
All right, let's get to it. Judge Amy Coney Barrett sat for a marathon 12-hour day of questioning from senators in which she spoke in broad terms about Supreme Court precedent, but generally avoided answering questions about how she might rule in landmark cases related to abortion, healthcare, or the election. She presented herself as a textualist who would vote based on how the Constitution was intended to be interpreted by the framers. Barrett declined to pledge to recuse herself should the upcoming election get kicked over to the court. And she also wouldn't answer a question about whether the president should commit to a peaceful transfer of power. The judge, who sat for the entire hearing without any pre-written notes, will be back on the Hill today for the final day of questioning. And we know that about the notes because one of the senators asked her to show what she was looking at, and it was an empty pad.
That got a lot of praise, I think, in conservative circles yesterday. God, these things are just brutal, Jill. No matter who the nominee is, I hope that we can agree that these confirmation hearings are just so tough to watch. These things, they're supposed to be like a job interview, right? And the senators sort of like ask them questions about their qualifications, try and get them to answer questions about how they'd rule, which they never do. And then they sort of deliberate and, vote on whether or not they should be on the court or not. But the whole exercise has become so partisan that it's sort of irrelevant, right? We already know that she's going to be confirmed. The Republicans have the votes to confirm her. So I don't know. I just, having watched like hours of this yesterday, I just found it very tough. Second, can we agree that she should be played by Laura Linney in any movie? Don't you think?
They do, yeah, they do kind of look alike.
A little younger. She's a little younger.
I can't wait for SNL, but they have to do a better job than they did last week with the fly on Pence's head, making it Joe Biden flying in. I thought that was like
stupid.
They were gifted this fly, right? I mean,
totally.
You couldn't have written, as you always say, if you wrote it into a script,
right.
An editor would be like, there's no way, that's too unrealistic. Baker Machado, who fills in occasionally when we're not here, tweeted that Jenna Fisher from The Office should play Barrett, and he put up a side-to-side picture, and they look a lot alike. I do want to get back to some of the serious stuff, because like other justices before her, she wouldn't really answer a lot of questions. So we're, of course, left to kind of read between the lines on what she said. So regarding Roe v. Wade, she wouldn't describe it as a super precedent. That's like Brown versus Board of Education, which outlawed racial segregation in schools. Right. So this is concerning to a lot of people, especially women, because when she was a University of Notre Dame law professor, she signed an ad that said, quote, "It is time to put an end to the barbaric legacy of Roe v. Wade," which is, of course, that 1973 decision which legalized abortion. That whatever. I mean, take it for what you will, but that's how she feels about it. On the issue of gay marriage. Sorry, go on.
No. I think, they have to do these things where they sort of don't say what everybody knows they think, and I think this was a pretty good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, and if you say that super precedent means it's settled, it's the law of the land, it's done. Yep. On the issue of gay marriage, she was also asked if she agreed with Anthony Scalia's criticism of same-sex marriage, of that ruling, and she said, quote, "I would not discriminate on basis of sexual preference." So she basically kind of like said she had the right intention, I believe, but a lot of people noticed that the word choice here, she used preference, which indicates that she thinks that being gay is a preference or a choice.
Yeah, she later apologized for that, but I think that the fact that was the word that came to her mind, I think sort of shows an outdated view, and frankly an offensive view for a lot of LGBT people in 2020. It's just not really how you refer to sexual orientation these days. Back to one thing you said, Jill, about her describing herself as a textualist. The concept of originalism or textualism, which, if you've ever taken like a constitutional law class, you learn about, it's always just been so strange to me, right? Originalism is why we have like the worst gun laws in the developed world, right? Because it allows the court to rule that, the Second Amendment, which was written in a time when guns couldn't shoot more than 3 rounds a minute, means that basically anybody can have access to a high-powered rifle. So that's always the sort of anecdote that I think of here, because we're talking about a document that was written hundreds of years ago. Like, a lot of things have changed since then, and I understand a lot of people are like, well, it's a slippery slope if you start to think about the Constitution in ways that they may not have attended. I get that, but I mean, imagine if like James Madison, who wrote the Second Amendment, came back to life in 2020, right? First of all, he'd probably die of a heart attack as soon as he saw a car. But if not, he'd say, we really didn't consider the effect of 200 years of firearm innovation when we were talking about well-regulated militias and muskets, right? I mean, things change. The world changes. And I think that I personally believe that, the Supreme Court has to change with it.
And these are lifetime appointments, and there's a reason that they're lifetime appointments, right? So that the person cannot be swayed politically and they don't have to think about a career post the court. I mean, there's a reason that was written as a lifetime appointment, but these are huge. Whoever gets on the court could be there for the next few decades. A day after early voting kicked off in Georgia, with hours-long waits to cast a ballot, Texas voters lined up in droves to cast their ballots as early voting opened in the Lone Star State. So there were lines especially long in the largest counties in Texas, where residents who want to vote by mail have just one ballot box to access because of an order by the governor. In Virginia, the voter registration system was knocked offline for hours on the final day to register after a fiber optic cable was accidentally cut, sparking accusations of voter disenfranchisement.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to hear more about that, to be honest with you. The Texas thing, Jill, I don't know if we talked about this last week when this came out from Governor Abbott down there. I don't understand. I think I tweeted this. I don't understand how this is just not explicit voter suppression. A single ballot box per county. Think about that. Harris County, that's where Houston is, 4.7 million people. One ballot box. That's ridiculous. It's shameful, frankly. The other thing about voter registration, and I always think about this every election year, why do we even have voter registration? Why aren't you automatically registered to vote when you turn 18? I mean, you were talking about how it's been hard for you to re-register when you moved. The whole system is so arcane, and it basically feels like it's intended to keep people from voting. I mean, seriously, voter registration, the government knows when you turn 18, especially if you have a driver's license, right? Just put it on the, when you go to the DMV, just register to vote, and that's that.
It's just becoming increasingly more difficult to vote, and take that for what you will. But why, shouldn't, to your point, it should be easier to vote, not harder.
Yeah, and I think, and voter registration specifically is just like, I mean, I understand that you do register at the DMV, but it doesn't, like you were saying, it doesn't go with you when you move. I've had that mistake where I voted in the wrong place, and I'm somebody who pays attention to this stuff. The whole thing is just like crazy.
I want to get to an update now on the race for a COVID medical breakthrough. Eli Lilly has now paused its promising monoclonal antibody trial because of a potential safety concern. This is the latest clinical trial to temporarily halt as scientists review the data. So this is a version of the treatment that the president was touting as a cure. He received a similar type of treatment from Regeneron. And it's also a day after Johnson & Johnson had to pause their vaccine trials because a patient got very sick. It's worth repeating that these trial complications are routine. So just because a patient got sick or one of the participants got sick, it doesn't mean it was because of the vaccine. They just have to figure out if it was, in fact, because of it or not, if they would have gotten sick anyway. So these types of complications happen all the time, but the intense public interest that we're seeing in these therapies just amplifies them. Basically, we're seeing how the sausage gets made. I do think, in general, this is good, so that the public can have faith that ultimately these treatments are safe, that they have gone through all of the processes that they normally would.
I agree. When I get these headlines, it doesn't upset me. I think like, okay, they're doing what they have to do. They're going through these trials and they're being transparent about what's happening, and that's good for everybody, especially these days. Meanwhile, Jill, on the COVID front, cases skyrocketing across Europe. The EU just started this new traffic light system where they're going to have color-coded zones based on risk levels that will be instituted across the Eurozone. So the countries have to submit their data voluntarily, so it could be a little bit messy, but just something to keep an eye on there. Meanwhile, back here in the U.S., cases on an upward trajectory pretty much everywhere. The Great Plains, the Mountain West, the Midwest, even the Northeast, seeing the most worrisome trends. We're notching about 50,000 new cases a day. That's down from 66,000 at the summer peak back in July, but obviously still, way too many, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the trend is not going in the right direction at all. One piece of good news here in New York is some of those zip codes that we're seeing this huge surge in cases. They've kind of slowed down a bit, so it looks like that's getting under control. But we were proudly below that 1% positivity rate, and as a state, we have ticked above it. So, all right, let's talk a little tech. As expected, Apple unveiled a new line of iPhones, the iPhone 12. They're going to be priced at about $700 and up. So $700 for the entry model, $1,000 and up for the high-end model. An unchanged pricing model from its most recent releases. The iPhone 12 will have a new screen technology, faster chips, and be 5G capable. They're also thinner, lighter, and smaller than the iPhone 11.
The pricing is what caught my eye, actually. I think they're. I mean, obviously those prices are expensive, but I think Apple's sort of cognizant of the economic conditions right now, so they aren't raising prices, which I guess is good. But again, $700 for an entry-level phone, obviously not cheap. Apple also dropped a new surprise entry-level HomePod smart speaker for $100 that looks kind of cool. I think that may become popular. Though I have to say, Jill, I think Becky and I. Our house is still very anti-smart speaker. I don't know. Do you have one of these things?
I do,
right?
And I was kind of anti-smart speaker too until I got one and realized how convenient
that's what everybody says.
It is creepy though, because occasionally you don't say the wake word and they awaken, and you're just like, why are they? They listen to everything, right? We know that, and. You know that there's kind of cameras everywhere when you leave your house, and I do think there is something creepy about somebody always listening when you are home. But with a kid, the level of convenience to just be like, Alexa, set a timer. And I'm sorry, if that just set off anybody's Alexa, I do apologize for that.
That's funny. I do like when we hear these stories about like a baby's first words now being Alexa or Siri, just because they're so used to hearing their parents say it. That's a little scary.
So we almost didn't name Alex, my daughter Alexandra. I almost changed the name because of Alexa. And just the prevalence. Really? Yeah, but I just loved the name, and it has such significance for me. So I
feel bad for people. I feel bad for people who are named Alexa, and then this happens, and you're like, oh, great. So now I'm just a computer AI, right?
We did learn from, I think it was one of the tech hearings, that the original word that they wanted to use, I think, was Amazon, and not Alexa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Google, by the way, I've yet to figure out how to turn that on. I have a Google Home device, and we can't figure it out, and every once in a while it will just go on, and if anyone has one, can you let me know how you activate it? Okay, an update to a story that we have been covering on the podcast, which is the crisis facing movie theaters. AMC is warning investors that it is at risk of running out of money by the end of the year. Of course, attendance levels are down by about 75% this year. The largest theater chain in the U.S. burning cash like crazy, trying to find new ways to tap liquidity to keep it from collapsing, given that there are just 4 major films on the schedule for the rest of the year. And even that would be optimistic.
Yeah, I don't know if any of these movies are actually going to come out at this point. I did see a Groupon deal yesterday, Jill. Somebody sent this to me. You can rent out an entire AMC theater for you and 20 people for $99. That's a good deal.
Wow. They should do that. That's a great idea.
Right. I was actually thinking about just splurging and doing it for myself. Like, wouldn't that be just
Totally.
take the day off of work, buy out a movie theater? The problem is there's nothing I even really want to see.
Couldn't you pick
Jill,
the movie?
Yeah, I think there's a list of some movies, but I haven't seen how many they actually have. But it would be fun. But
Where was that when my birthday came around? That would have been a great.
Yeah, right?
I love
That would be a good
idea.
birthday gift. Anyway, Jill, I wanted to mention this because I know you're a big Coming to America fan, and it sort of jives with what we were just talking about. But the Coming to America sequel just got bought by Amazon Studios, so I doubt that we'll be seeing that in theaters. That's just another hit to the movie theaters, right?
Oh my gosh, is that not one of the best movies ever?
Yeah.
The first one, anyway. I hope they
yeah.
don't butcher the sequel, but
See.
I mean, we still actively quote Coming to America in our house.
It's pretty quotable.
In sports, the big Florida LSU game this weekend in jeopardy after the Gators paused all football activities over a potential COVID outbreak on the team. The University of Florida saying there have been 5 positive tests. The AP reports, though, that number has spiked to 19. Last week, Florida head coach Dan Mullen had asked the school to allow 90,000 fans to pack the stands at the Swap. That is the name of the Florida stadium. Other big names in sports, by the way, also testing positive. Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player or football player, and golfer Dustin Johnson, who had to withdraw from the latest golf tournament.
Oh God, the Florida thing. Some of these coaches, it's just astounding to me. It's like they live on another earth. Jill, before we go, I do want to just expand and clarify something I said the other day. If you'll give me sort of a minute of the floor.
You got the floor. Let's
okay.
hear it.
A couple people wrote in to echo what you were saying. Whenever that was, Monday, about the enthusiasm gap. With regard to President Trump and Joe Biden. And I don't disagree with that. Of course, some people were saying like, oh, Carlo, you're such an out of touch like liberal from New York or whatever, and that that may be true. I do live in Brooklyn. We don't get a lot of like Trump boater parades here on the Gowanus Canal, admittedly, but I do think I have a fairly good handle on what's going on in this country, which is helped, by the way, by hearing from a lot of our listeners who write in from different places. But what I believe is happening this election cycle that I think is going under-examined in the media is basically the inverse of what happened in 2016. It's true that there is an enthusiasm gap between Trump and Biden. There are people who would walk over hot coals to vote for Donald Trump in November. But there are also people who would walk over hot coals to vote against him. And I think that's what people are missing. Biden is almost irrelevant in this election, I hate to say. It was always going to be about President Trump. President Trump is a widely unpopular, disliked, and distrusted politician. That's just a fact. His approval rating has never hit 50% in 4 years. He has not expanded the electoral map. He has not given independent voters a reason to vote for him. In fact, he's defending places on the map that he shouldn't have to. He's doing a rally in Iowa today. He won Iowa by 9 points. He's in Georgia this weekend, for crying out loud. Georgia. Still, I'm looking at the data here, and I'm not one of these people who is so PTSD-ridden from 2016 about missing things that they're just not able to believe anything anymore. Trump is losing. If the election were today, he would lose, and it would not be close. And the reason why I believe he is going to lose, and that's not to say that I think it's a foregone conclusion by any stretch, but I think that most people in this country are just exhausted. They are so tired, and they are sick of Donald Trump being the main character in their lives every day. And I think that that's the thing that's going to sink him. So we'll see whether I'm right in 3 weeks. Hopefully we know one way or another when we're talking on the Wednesday podcast after election night, right? But I just wanted to.
I like that you think we're gonna know on Wednesday.
I hope so. One way or the other. I hope so.
All right, Carlo. Well, I'm glad you said your piece, and I appreciate all of the people who have written in.
As do I. Yes.
And we'll see, right? I mean, there's a reason. I always say in football, because my husband's, as you know, this crazy Ohio State fan, and I'm always like, there's a reason there's 4 quarters, because he'll get so down in the first half. And I feel like I'm kind of annoying with it because I don't know that much about sports. However, there's a reason. There's early voting. You got to wait until the votes are counted on election day. There's absentee ballots. We'll see. This process has to play out. And I hope I didn't, create this impression that you're like this, liberal in
No, no, I don't
in
think
your Brooklyn apartment sipping, $10 lattes or something. It's just
Right.
more like, I think all of us are, particularly in the media, there's a real issue right now where
Totally.
in
Absolutely.
2016 we realized that the mainstream media was out of touch with the way with Americans who don't live in big cities perhaps feel.
No question.
And I think that issue's, while a lot had been done to correct that in the last few years, that issue is only amplified more because of coronavirus. And you can't get out and talk to anybody, and it's
Yeah.
hard to
No, I think
travel.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that.
And it's certainly nothing personal against you. I just think it's hard for us to know how this is going to go.
Yeah. Again, we'll see, and feel free to write in, even if you are going to call me an idiot from New York who doesn't know what he's talking about. I reply to all emails, as you know.
Yes, we read them and we love them. Write in, and thanks for listening. That's what you need to know for Wednesday, October 14th.
Okay, guys, have a good one.